Stay home, call relatives, do home learning. Links in the description and on ePraise. Make sure you're clicking the Do Now quiz and not the form to do the 6 marker that you'll use later. And you've already seen the answers, so that's easy. Another excellent couple of pages of geography from Kai. In particular, we've got the 2 marker down in the corner, and we can see that he's made very precise use of keywords attrition, collides, and others to make sure he gets both marks. And some more excellent work from Sophie, who's produced a fantastic page, but I just want to pick out this one section. She's spoken about attrition with material carried in the river breaking apart as it collides with the bed and the banks. It's actually better to say that during the process of attrition, material carried by the river collides and breaks apart itself. So we're going to continue looking at river processes, and having looked at erosion yesterday, we're going to talk today about transportation and deposition, and then look at a more extended answer. And a brief recap. Rivers shape the land in 3 ways. The first one, erosion, when material is removed from the bed and the banks. The second one, transportation, when that material is carried away by the flow of the river. And the third one, deposition, when that material that's being carried is put down. So following on from yesterday's work on erosion, we're going to start today by looking at the 4 processes of transportation. First off, traction, and this is when large rocks or boulders are rolled along the bed of the river by the flow of the water. Next, we have saltation. As the material within the river, the boulders start to get smaller as they turn into rocks and pebbles. They can then be bounced along by the flow of the water, and if you look really closely at a small stream, often you'll see these small rocks and pebbles being bounced along the riverbed. As attrition means that material gets smaller and smaller and smaller again, and as it becomes small particles of sand or silt, those particles are small enough to now float within the river. Material that's carried floating in the river is carried in suspension, and this will then turn the river brown. It's not brown because it's dirty, it's brown because it's carrying lots of material in suspension. Finally, and be really careful with this, material that is dissolved, like calcium carbonate, which is dissolved by slightly acidic river water, this material is known as solute, and this material is carried within the river through the process of transportation known as solution. But you can't see it because solute is clear. So you can't see material being transported by solution, but if material has been dissolved, then it will be transported by solution. Okay, so you may need to listen back through the 4 definitions 2 or 3 times to get this into your head, and that's absolutely fine. But once you've done it and you feel confident and comfortable with it, see if you can copy and complete this table and fill it in as best you can. And there are some answers. Check what you've written against those. It could be that you've got some bits of additional detail, but this is a good basic standard to meet. So just before we move on, a quick recap on the characteristics of a river. You've got 3 courses between the source and the mouth, the upper, the middle and the lower. In the upper course, typically it's found in upland areas where valleys have steep V-shapes. In the middle course, as we're moving away from upland areas, the valleys become U-shaped and more gentle, and by the time we hit the lower course, we've got open U-shapes, very wide valleys, a much wider and deeper channel, and a faster flowing river. In terms of how this applies to our processes of transportation, in the upper course where material generally is much larger, we'll see more traction and saltation. By the time we get down to the lower course, we'll see much more suspension and potentially more solution. So on to deposition. Deposition is when the river puts material down, and the river can put material down all the way along its length. In the upper course, boulders are rolled typically by traction, and it could be that the river has enough energy to roll a boulder apart part way along, but then if it hasn't got enough energy to move it, then that boulder has been deposited. Over time, that boulder might break down due to attrition, or bits might break off that boulder and it might be carried away perhaps by siltation, but deposition can occur in the upper course. However, when we talk about deposition, it's more common to talk about the middle and the lower course, and to talk about material that's been carried in suspension, these fine sands and silt-like materials being deposited. Now this can happen because perhaps the river floods and the river loses energy, or it could be because the river reaches its mouth. At that point, as the river flows into a lake or a sea, the flow of the water stops and any material being carried in the river sinks to the bottom, and that is deposition. Deposition occurs whenever a river doesn't have enough energy to carry its load. Whenever a river loses energy, that's when we get deposition. So an exam question, 6 marker, and I think a relatively tough one. Explain why river processes of transportation and deposition change downstream. Now, as it's a 6 marker, we want 2 paragraphs. I would suggest we have a paragraph on transportation and a paragraph on deposition. It's an explained 6 marker, so it doesn't need a conclusion. And I would suggest you go back over, if you're not confident with this, go back over the explanations in the video on transportation, the explanations in the video on deposition, and consider how do processes of transportation change from upper to middle to lower course? How does deposition change between upper, middle and lower course? And that goes into your 2 paragraphs to form your answers. Think hard about it. This is tough, so I will do some feedback on this when we have our first lesson next week. Good news is though, you've got some options here. Either write your answer and email a photo of it to me so that I can have a read of it and give some feedback, or you can use the link in the description to type your answer onto forms. Make sure you're not trying to do it into the Do Now quiz, that won't work, but there is in the description a link to a form which will enable you to type a 6 marker. You still need to time yourself and still give yourself 6 minutes, although if you're a slightly slow typer, you might want to allow yourself a little bit longer. Pause here and have a go. And here's a model answer. As you can see, 2 paragraphs, one talking about transportation and a second one talking about deposition. In the upper course, much material is transported by traction and siltation. This is because large boulders are rolled along the river bed and smaller stones bounce along it. As the load size reduces downstream due to attrition, suspension increases in the middle and lower course. This is when fine silts and clays are carried within the river's water as the load is now much smaller. Some large load is deposited in the upper course, but in the middle and lower course, deposition is more likely to be small sediment like silt. This is smaller in size, but a larger amount is left behind. This happens in places where the river loses energy, such as at the mouth, where the river enters the sea. So good news, knowledge organiser pages and quiz questions are on ePraise. Try to do it in the same place that you did last week. So if that's the back of the yellow books, great. If you've got a separate notebook, great. Try and keep it all together. Have a go at those as you would a normal homework.